Hi, this is Eternal King bringing you another LOR video today. I want to tackle a subject that is easily misunderstood and not easy to quantify, and that's meta balance. So right now, the Eternal meta in LOR is exceptionally balanced. I would argue that this is one of the strongest states from a pure numbers perspective, one of the strongest metas that we've ever had in Eternal. To the point where you can basically play whatever it is you want. If you want to play Vlad, there is a 60% win rate deck with Vlad currently in Eternal. If you want to play Storm, there is absolutely a TF deck that is 55% win rate in Eternal. If you want to play aggro, there are plenty of aggro options. And just to illustrate this point, I've pulled the number 60 deck from MasteringRuneterra.com. So like literally 60 decks down the tier list for MasteringRuneterra.com. And I'm going to show you this deck. And you won't believe this, but this is basically just as good as, this deck is just as good as Ziggs Poppy. Which is insane to say. Like absolutely insane to say that a deck that is 60 numbers down the tier list. Deck 60 on the Eternal Ladder tier list is performing around the same as Ziggs Poppy, kind of at that 58% aggro mark. And when you see that, when you can scroll down a tier list and scroll and scroll and scroll and hit that, 60 decks down the list and see that it's performing just as well as the top meta decks, that's how you know you're in a perfectly balanced meta. The opposite is also true. When I did a video on Standard recently, and I talked about how Gwen was present in two of the top decks, and that it was like way beating out the competition in, every other deck was just inferior to Gwen currently in Standard, and how that was a sign of an unhealthy meta, and how Standard's a mess in LOR, and kind of always has been. Due to the lack of appropriate removal cards and answers, and again, open attack spam being even more powerful in the Standard format than it is in Eternal, and it's already very good in Eternal. So again, looking at this deck, because we might as well break it down. First of all, there's the illustration that, wow, 60 decks down, we have a 58% win rate list that is performing well in the Eternal meta, and just as well as the top decks. And of course, it is an elusive deck, so you can hate elusives all you want, but it is a valid way to play the game. So we have Beard once again. I think it's amazing how many decks Beard shows up in. Just that, he's basically a better Omen Hawk, and Omen Hawk's also a very good card, and a lot of people swear by the new buffs to Omen Hawk where he can block elusives, which is really good into like a Teemo or a Zoe, or this deck specifically. So Omen Hawk's pretty good. Beard's even better. The fact that he's a 2-1, he's a 2-1 that pushes the 1-1 stats to another card. He's going to show up in a lot of decks. He's very good. You won't want him in a control deck, but most like aggro, tempo, Bandle City decks will want to run Beard. So Beard's very good. Zoe, honestly, people kind of go less for Zoe's level up these days. She's just kind of an elusive card that will summon more elusives. She summons the 3-mana Otter. Off of her star chart. So off of her star chart, she will summon more elusives, or she'll give a current elusive spell shield, or maybe even you need a snake in certain situations. If the opponent plays an elusive blocker and you get snake, you can drag the elusive blocker. So there are so Zoe's very good as a tempo card, and sometimes as a kind of control-y or combo card. Less so now though. Typically Nora does better. So like Nora Swain, Nora is kind of a better Zoe, but Zoe can be played both ways. But definitely better is more of a tempo card, aggro elusive type deal. Of course, Esmus, Breath of the World. Again, not quite as good as Beard, but in an elusive deck does exactly what you want, which is providing you with an extra body, supporting and granting your other elusive more stats, and then also shuffling more stats into the deck. So very good. Lunari gets played in most kind of tempo-y elusive decks nowadays. Just the fact that she's a 2-3 and makes her harder to remove is good enough. It's very hard to find these stats on an elusive unit. Typically, she's basically, this stat line is 3 mana typically with this keyword. and now she's only 2 mana. And her requirement to simply play 1 card before playing her isn't that big of a deal. So very good, not a great Nightfall card, but a very good kind of elusive tempo card. As we see in this kind of number 60 Eternal meta deck that is, winning 58% of games. Of course, I said Nora. Nora's in a lot of high-performing Eternal decks, very few standard decks. I don't play Nora, typically. I think Nora is a very lazy champion to run, but it's you can't argue with her success rate because she basically does everything a pro player wants, which is A, open attack pressure, and B, devaluating your opponent's open attack pressure. Like that's literally the only thing pro players care about in a deck construction. So Nora does that. Nora is literally the 8 is like the perfect card for doing exactly that, which is, okay, I'm going to hit you for 1 and open attack and shuffle value into my deck, and then when you try to open attack me, there's a chance that I will spawn a unit to block your open attack. That's all they want to do. Okay, Pale Cascade, really good combat trick in Targon, staple card, don't need to explain that. Pokey Stick, again, very good, very, very strong ping card, and honestly, in my opinion, all the best decks should run some sort of ping. Pings are just amazing. So, it's good for burn, it's good for cycling, it's good for removing a problem, unit that happens to have 1 life, whether it is an elusive blocker or some sort of value machine. Whatever it is. It could be the 2/1 elusive from Blade Dance decks. Whatever it is, Pokey finds value. It's always good. And new card, Skip, King of the Reef. Pick 1 of 2 non-champion cards from the enemy hand and capture it. This is very MTG, and I do like to see the LOR devs really stretching what a card can do. And in fact, there was a staple card, a humans card in MTG that did pretty much the exact same thing as this card, where it was a 1/2 flyer human card that would allow you to capture any, I'm not sure if it was a spell or it was a creature, it was one or the other, but it would allow you to capture something, put it underneath your card, and then prevent your opponent from using it. So, in this case, you could capture an avalanche, which would be really, high value. Yeah, because any non-champion card. So you could capture an avalanche, you could capture a mystic shot, any sort of response that your opponent might have to you, or big blowout card, you can just steal that. So exceptionally good in this deck. I think Skip's really cool design-wise, and it just goes to show that the LOR devs are just getting better and better at making their card game. It's a shame that Eternal isn't that popular, because again, cards like this are going to thrive. They thrive in Modern, in MTG, and they're going to thrive in Eternal and LOR, where it's such a high skill play. It's such a smart card design. So I like Skip a lot. Skip's cool. I haven't played him at all, and you saw me craft him on the spot there, but really cool card. Tailstones is interesting. I think it's just the flexibility of okay, in certain matchups, you can just spend the mana and invoke something big. So sometimes you'll just invoke, the 9 mana elusive with Spell Shield, and that's the card you need to win. Sometimes you pull out the Hush, sometimes you pull out the buff. It's just flexibility, in a can. Lodestone, very obvious. I'm surprised this deck isn't running Lodestone as a 3-of. I might drop one of the Tailstones for a 3rd Lodestone, honestly, because I think it's so important in this deck. I would have to try it out, because 2 and 2 in terms of ratioing is actually very smart in LOR. I find that ratioing works for me as well. You saw it in my Ziggs Poppy deck where I did the 2/2 ratioing, so it might be correct just to have the 2 Lodestones and then you hard mulligan for one of them. Sparklefly, again, this is a staple card for an elusive tempo deck because it allows you to push damage, but then also heal, so that you're devaluing your opponent's open attack. And I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. It's going to sound very redundant, but that's literally a lot of kind of high level Eternal play. Is okay, it's open attack spamming and then devaluing your opponent's open attack. That's a lot of Eternal, and I'm okay with that because in Standard it's just open attack spam and then the other option doesn't exist. So at least here you have the flexibility of devaluating your opponent's open swing. Which is a little, a little less unga bunga, a little, more big brain, which is nice. Winged Messenger, It's pretty obvious when this card was printed that it was going to be very, very good for elusive decks. Its interaction with chimes is amazing. Its interaction with support effects, like Breath of the World, and of course the equipment as well, Dark and Lodestone, which is why, again, the 2 is interesting. But yeah, the interaction with effects like that is amazing. And yeah, we're all in on 3 Brothers Bond is mandatory. Brothers Bond is your burst. Remember before when I talked about how good the 2 mana provide 2 damage for 2 units swinging was really good in Ziggs Poppy. Brothers Bond is that, but for elusives, because in the elusives deck you need the defense as well, so you don't get blown out by removal on the open swing. The life value is much more important than in a traditional aggro deck. And then we also have Blessing of Targon. So they're full on doubling down on the burst value. I think there used to be a 4 mana card that people ran as well, which allowed you to shuffle stats into your hand. Purifying Flames. So they nerfed this by 1/1, so I guess you don't run this anymore. It's an interesting question of whether, Blessing of Targon was buffed as well, so now it's 4 mana. So I guess between the two, the Blessing of Targon makes a lot of sense. I might even drop the Tellstones for the Purifying Flame because I'm a meme lord, so I might run the 2 Purifying Flame, drop the Tellstones, and then yeah, that might look a little bit better to me in terms of the way that I play. But it depends. It's up to you. It's up to you. It's not a straightforward equation, not at all. But yeah, so this is an example of a very, very competitive Eternal deck with a 58% win rate that is number 60 on the Eternal meta. So again, Eternal is awesome. You can play a deck that is literally 60, lists down the meta and have it be a really cool deck. This is a cool deck. I like this deck. This deck is neat. It does what it's supposed to. I love the skip inclusion. I can't really, gush about how awesome Eternal is as a format in LOR. That this is possible because again, you don't see this in card games. There's no such thing as 60 valid Eternal decks. That does not exist. Or 60 valid meta decks. Sorry, that normally does not exist in card games. Usually it's 5 valid meta decks, maybe 10 at most, not 60. So yeah, this is Eternal King signing out. This was just a little fun gushing about, meta balance and how a healthy card game can exist where you have infinite possibilities and infinite decks to play. All right, take care.